ever pled guilty to the practice of witchcraft?
I know of no others.
Again?
We often look back at the past through the lens of the present, finding aspects of bygone eras strange, unsettling, or even outright shocking. However, it's crucial to remember that what seems unusual to us today was often considered the norm in the context of its time. This explores 15 such practices and concepts, painting a vivid picture of how much societal norms and understanding have evolved.
My children need me!
Number 1. Memento Mori photography. In an era without social media and digital memories, the 19th century practice of post-mortem photography, known as Memento Mori, served a crucial purpose. These photographs captured the likeness of deceased individuals, often infants and young children who had fallen victim to the high mortality rates of the time. It was common to dress the deceased in their best attire, placing them in lifelike poses. Sometimes they were even positioned with living family members in a final eerie family portrait. It was not unusual for these photos to be the only images that families would have of their lost loved ones. The name Memento Mori itself is a Latin phrase meaning "remember you must die," which encapsulates the gravity and sentimentality of these keepsakes. Families often kept these photographs in their homes or carried them as pocket-sized tokens, finding comfort in having a tangible memory. In some cases, the eyes of the deceased would be propped open, or pupils would be painted on in an attempt to impart a sense of life and vivacity. Some photographs even included symbols or objects intended to signify the individual's passage to the afterlife or embody a message, like a flower for innocence or a book for wisdom. The decline of this practice in the early 20th century can be attributed to several factors. Advances in medicine led to longer life expectancies, thus decreasing the urgent need for such memorials. Additionally, as photography became more accessible, people had more opportunities to capture images of their loved ones while they were still alive. This technological and social progress made post-mortem photography less necessary and increasingly viewed as a relic of a bygone era. Nonetheless, these haunting images remain, serving as a window into the complexities and rituals of a society wrestling with mortality in the absence of modern comforts and understanding. Number 2. Leech Therapy. Long before the advent of modern medicine, leech therapy or hyrudotherapy held a prominent place in medical practices around the world. Originating in ancient civilizations, including Egypt and India, the use of leeches for therapeutic purposes was rooted in the belief that these creatures could purify the blood and restore bodily imbalances. In ancient times, the principle of the four humors, blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, dominated medical thinking. An imbalance among these humors was believed to be the root cause of illness, and leeches were thought to help restore this balance by removing bad blood. During medieval times, leeches became a staple in European apothecaries and were often used to treat an array of conditions ranging from headaches to more severe ailments like leprosy. Doctors, known as barber surgeons, applied leeches to various parts of the body in an attempt to cure or alleviate symptoms. Leeches were such a valuable commodity that there were even professional leech collectors who would venture into marshy terrains to gather these blood-sucking annelids. While the use of leeches in the past might evoke a sense of primitive medicine, it's a testament to the lengths humans have gone to understand and interact with the natural world to seek relief from physical ailments. The trajectory of leech therapy, from ancient humoral theory to 19th century medical craze, and its nuanced existence today, offers a captivating glimpse into the ever-evolving realm of medical practices and human health. Number 3. Public executions. Public executions were once a common spectacle, drawing large crowds that gathered to witness the ultimate form of punishment meted out by the state. Far from being considered gruesome or inappropriate, these events were often treated as social occasions, attended by men, women, and sometimes even children. In some instances, they were large enough to warrant vendors selling food and souvenirs. The practice was prevalent across various cultures and eras, from the Roman Empire to medieval Europe and colonial America. For the authorities, public executions served multiple purposes. They acted as a deterrent, demonstrating the severe consequences of criminal behavior. But they also provided a form of rough justice and communal catharsis, as people felt a sense of collective involvement in the administration of justice. Execution methods varied widely, often depending on the crime and the cultural context. Beheadings, hangings, and even more gruesome methods like drawing and quartering were employed. The location was carefully chosen for maximum visibility. Executions were often carried out in central public squares, outside churches, or on specially erected platforms. Not just the act, but also the ritual leading up to it. The last meal, the final words, and the pronouncement of the sentence were all part of the spectacle. In some cases, the executed were left on display post-mortem as a lasting warning to others. The arrival of newspapers and broadsheets helped to disseminate the details and lessons of these events far and wide, serving an educational purpose according to the norms of the time. While the notion of public executions is largely abhorrent to modern sensibilities, understanding their historical context is vital. They offer a mirror to the complexities and contradictions of past societies, illustrating how views on justice, ethics, and communal involvement in punishment have evolved over time. The echoes of this form of public punishment still resonate in ongoing debates about the role and nature of the penal system in contemporary society. Number 4. Foot binding. Foot binding was a deeply ingrained cultural practice in China that persisted for nearly a millennium. Often initiated on girls as young as 5 or 6, the procedure involved breaking the arches of the feet and then tightly binding them with cloth to restrict growth. The feet were folded under and compressed until they reached the ideal lotus shape, measuring just 3 to 4 inches long. This custom was especially prevalent among the Han Chinese and became an essential criterion for the marriageability of a woman. Foot binding was seen as a sign of elegance and refinement, and women with bound feet were often regarded as more desirable and virtuous. The process of foot binding was excruciatingly painful and led to lifelong disability. Many women experienced severe health issues, including infections, gangrene, and immobility, resulting in a dramatically reduced quality of life. Nevertheless, the tradition continued, fortified by a societal structure that elevated the importance of male preference and the notion of female beauty as defined by extreme physical alteration. Today, foot binding is generally seen as a dark chapter in the annals of human rights, often cited as an extreme example of the lengths to which societal pressures can deform and objectify the female body. While it is easy to criticize the practice from a modern standpoint, understanding its historical and cultural context provides insights into the complex interplay of beauty, status, and societal norms. The legacy of foot binding remains as a cautionary tale, an illustration of the powerful but often detrimental impact of cultural practices on individual lives, especially when they intersect with issues of gender and social standing. Number 5. Child labor. Child labor, a practice that now universally evokes moral outrage, was a widespread and generally accepted component of industrial societies only a few generations ago. In the 18th and 19th centuries, as factories mushroomed during the Industrial Revolution, employing children in grueling work conditions was not only commonplace, but also considered economically practical. Children were cheaper to employ than adults, less likely to strike, and their smaller size made them ideal for tasks that adults found difficult or cumbersome, like crawling under machinery to make repairs or working in tight spaces. In countries like Britain and the United States, it was not uncommon to see children as young as 6 or 7 working in textile mills, coal mines, or as chimney sweeps. The workdays were long, often stretching to 14 or 16 hours with minimal breaks. Safety standards were virtually non-existent, leading to high rates of accidents and chronic health conditions. Many of these children were essentially robbed of their childhoods, with little or no opportunity for education or play, the hallmarks of modern childhood. The conditions were particularly harsh for orphans or children of impoverished families who had little choice but to subject themselves to such a life to contribute to their family's income or simply to survive. This exploitation wasn't limited to the industrial sectors alone. Agriculture, too, employed a large number of children, particularly during busy seasons. They were tasked with everything from picking cotton to harvesting crops. The environment might have been different from the factories, but the hardships were comparable. Long hours, intense physical labor, and exposure to the elements with little or no protective gear. Today, child labor is widely condemned and illegal in many parts of the world, though it unfortunately persists in some developing nations. The transformation from a world where child labor was the norm to one where childhood is primarily a time for education and development is a striking example of social progress, illustrating the capacity for change in deeply entrenched systems when societal attitudes evolve. Number 6. Corsets. Corsets, the iconic undergarments that cinched women's waists into an hourglass shape, were once an essential part of a woman's wardrobe from the Renaissance period up to the early 20th century. Originating in Europe, these garments made their way across the Atlantic to the United States and became a symbol of elegance, femininity, and social status. Composed of materials like bone, whalebone, and later steel, corsets were designed to drastically reduce the size of a woman's waist and accentuate her bust and hips, conforming to societal beauty standards of the time.
Now, pull!
It wasn't until the First World War that corsets began to lose their stronghold. The war effort required steel, and suddenly, the material that had been used to restrict women's waists was needed for a more critical purpose. Around the same time, cultural shifts toward a more natural silhouette and the rise of sportswear contributed to the corset's decline in popularity. In the decades that followed, the corset would largely be replaced by brassieres and girdles, which offered support without the extreme constriction. Today, the corset is looked upon with a mix of fascination and incredulity, an artifact from a bygone era that speaks to changing norms around beauty and the lengths to which people will go to achieve it. While the garment still exists in various forms like waist trainers or as a fashion statement, its use is far removed from the near-universal, daily wear it once enjoyed. Number 7. Dueling. Dueling, the practice of resolving disputes through a formalized combat between two parties, was an accepted and even esteemed aspect of many societies from the late Middle Ages to the 19th century. Though the exact codes and procedures varied depending on the time and place, the core principle remained the same. It was a method to defend one's honor against a personal affront or accusation. Dueling became particularly prevalent among the military and aristocratic classes in Europe, especially in France, Germany, and Britain, where intricate codes of conduct were developed to govern the practice. Most duels were prompted by perceived insults, challenges to one's honor, or to settle personal disagreements. The offended party would issue a challenge, often through a formal letter or face-to-face confrontation, and if the challenge was accepted, both parties would agree on the terms, including the choice of weapons, usually swords or pistols, and the dueling ground. A set of rules known as the Code Duello would dictate these conditions, outlining everything from the role of seconds, or the friends who would act as intermediaries and witnesses, to the conditions under which a duel could be honorably concluded. Today, the concept of dueling seems almost anachronistic, a throwback to a time when personal honor was considered worth risking one's life. Although the practice has disappeared, the idea of dueling provides insight into how cultural attitudes toward conflict resolution, masculinity, and honor have evolved over the years. Number 8. Witch trials. Witch trials, a dark phenomenon primarily of the early modern period, were fueled by a potent combination of religious fervor, social paranoia, and legal sanction. Rooted in the belief that malevolent magic was not just a possibility, but a palpable force in the world, witch hunts led to thousands of executions across Europe and the American colonies. From the infamous Salem witch trials in Massachusetts to the widespread persecutions in Germany, France, and Scotland, this was a global crisis that saw people, overwhelmingly women, accused, tried, and often executed for witchcraft. The accused were subjected to various tests to determine their guilt. One such test involved binding the accused's hands and feet and throwing them into water. The twisted logic held that if the person floated, it was proof of witchcraft. If they sank, they were innocent, but would often drown in the process. Other tests included searching for witch marks on the body, where it was believed the devil had made his mark, or demanding the recitation of prayers without mistakes or hesitations. A nearly impossible task under such high-stress conditions. Today, the witch trials are remembered as a cautionary tale about the dangers of mass hysteria, the perils of religious extremism, and the fragility of social cohesion under stress. They serve as a grim reminder that even communities bound by faith and tradition can turn against themselves when fueled by fear and governed by ignorance. Number 9. Bloodletting. Bloodletting was a medical practice that persisted for centuries, tracing its roots to ancient civilizations like Egypt and Greece. Underlying this seemingly barbaric procedure was the belief in the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, as crucial elements that had to be balanced to maintain good health. Physicians and barber surgeons carried out bloodletting to treat a variety of ailments, from headaches and fevers to more severe conditions like epilepsy and plague. They used specialized instruments like lancets and fleams, or in some cases leeches to draw blood, believing that the removal of excess blood would restore equilibrium to the body's humoral system. Despite its popularity, the practice was not without its critics, even in its heyday. Renaissance physicians like Paracelsus questioned the humoral theory and thereby the rationale for bloodletting. By the 19th century, advances in medical science revealed the lack of efficacy of bloodletting for most conditions it purported to treat. The practice declined in favor of more effective treatments based on emerging understandings of anatomy, physiology, and pathology. While almost entirely obsolete today, the legacy of bloodletting survives in some modern medical procedures that involve controlled bleeding for specific conditions, albeit backed by scientific rationale rather than humoral theory. Number 10. Trepanning. Trepanning, or trephination, is a surgical procedure that involves drilling a hole into the skull. It is one of the oldest forms of surgery, with evidence dating back to prehistoric times. Ancient civilizations from the Andes to Mesopotamia practiced trepanning for both medical and mystical reasons. While modern neurosurgery includes procedures that could be considered descendants of trepanning, the early motivations were vastly different. It was believed that creating a hole in the skull could treat a range of conditions like seizures, migraines, and mental disorders. The opening was also thought to release evil spirits causing illness or possession. Over time, as understanding of the brain and its functions expanded, the use of trepanning for mystical or unproven medical reasons gradually declined. By the 19th and 20th centuries, it was largely replaced by more precise neurosurgical techniques. Modern trepanation is performed under sterile conditions, usually for conditions like subdural hematomas or to relieve intracranial pressure, and bears little resemblance to its ancient precursor. Both bloodletting and trepanning offer glimpses into the medical understanding and cultural beliefs of bygone eras, showing how far medicine has come and serving as a humbling reminder of the limitations of human knowledge at various points in history. Number 11. Opium Parlors. Opium parlors were social establishments where patrons could purchase and consume opium, an addictive narcotic derived from the poppy plant. These parlors were especially prominent in the 19th and early 20th centuries, both in Asia and Western countries, like the United States and England. Initially, opium was used for medicinal purposes, but it quickly became a recreational substance. In the West, opium parlors were often associated with Chinese immigrants, becoming a part of the Chinatowns that sprung up in many cities. These establishments were elaborately decorated, featuring luxurious lounges with wooden divans lined with pillows, where customers could recline while smoking opium through special pipes. Today, the concept of an opium parlor seems almost inconceivable, an anachronistic relic of a time when the understanding of substance abuse and its societal implications were still in their infancy. The demise of opium parlors marked a turning point in how society approached recreational drug use, paving the way for modern drug policies and addiction treatment programs. Number 12. Sending children through the mail. In the early 20th century, during the infancy of the United States postal system, it was not uncommon for people to send not just letters and packages, but also, astoundingly, their own children through the mail. When the U.S. Post Office introduced the parcel post service in 1913, there were initially few regulations on what could be sent. Parents, seizing the opportunity for affordable travel, began mailing their children to relatives, often just a few towns away. These packages, usually children under the age of 5 who weighed less than the 50-pound weight limit, were affixed with postage stamps, and postal carriers would look after them during their journey. Today, the idea of mailing a child seems both absurd and shocking, a clear violation of safety and ethics. However, when placed in the context of a society still figuring out the capabilities and limitations of its newfound systems, it serves as a quirky, albeit disturbing, footnote in the evolution of modern postal services and child welfare practices. Number 13. Human zoos. The phenomenon of human zoos, or ethnological expositions, represents a dark chapter in the intersection of colonialism, racism, and public entertainment. These were exhibitions where people from colonized regions, often Africa, Asia, and the Americas, were displayed in simulated natural habitats for the curiosity and amusement of Western audiences. Popular from the late 19th to the early 20th century, these exhibitions were held in various settings, such as World's Fairs, circuses, and zoological gardens, primarily in Europe and the United States. Despite occasional protests and voices of dissent, the practice remained popular for decades, drawing large crowds and generating considerable revenue. It wasn't until the mid-20th century, as societal views on race and human rights evolved, that the practice came to be widely recognized as deeply exploitative and demeaning. In contemporary society, the very notion of a human zoo is, rightfully, considered abhorrent and unthinkable, serving as a grim reminder of the dehumanizing effects of racial prejudice and colonial arrogance. Number 14. Oracles and Divination. The practice of seeking guidance from oracles and various forms of divination has been integral to human societies for millennia. Whether it was the oracle at Delphi in ancient Greece or the I Ching in ancient China, the desire to know the future or to seek divine counsel transcended cultural boundaries. Typically situated in temples or other sacred spaces, oracles were individuals believed to have a special connection with the divine, enabling them to offer insights into the future or answers to troubling questions. While science and rationalism have relegated such practices to the fringes of modern Western society, forms of divination and oracle consultation continue in various cultures around the world. Even in contemporary times, astrology, tarot reading, and other New Age practices show that the human quest for predicting the future and seeking higher guidance persists. These ancient practices stand as a testament to the enduring human fascination with mystery, the divine, and the unknown. Number 15. Vapors and Hysteria. The concept of vapors and hysteria takes us back to a time when the medical understanding of psychological and physiological symptoms, particularly in women, was both rudimentary and steeped in social prejudices. Originating from ancient Greek medicine, the term hysteria is derived from the Greek word for uterus, hystera, which reveals the condition's gendered history. Hysteria was believed to be a female-specific ailment caused by disturbances in the uterus, which subsequently sent vapors to affect the brain. These vapors were thought to be the root cause of a wide range of symptoms, including emotional instability, nervousness, fainting spells, and even convulsions. In the 19th century, the concept of vapors and hysteria was well entrenched in medical discourse and popular culture. Medical practitioners of the time often attributed these conditions to the supposed delicate nature of women and their susceptibility to emotional and physical ailments. Treatments were as varied as the symptoms and included everything from bed rest and bland diets to hysterical paroxysm, which was essentially the inducement of orgasm as a form of relief. This latter treatment was so common that it led to the invention of the vibrator, initially a medical instrument designed to effectively treat hysteria. Women suffering from these conditions often found themselves confined to home or, worse, committed to asylums. The male-dominated medical community wielded significant power over the diagnosis and treatment of hysteria, effectively controlling women's bodies and lives. The narrative surrounding vapors and hysteria often served to dismiss women's legitimate medical or psychological concerns, reducing them to mere products of their anatomy. Today, the notions of vapors and hysteria seem outdated and discriminatory, relics of a time when medicine was tightly bound to cultural prejudices and limited by the absence of scientific inquiry. Although the term has been delegitimized in medical circles, the history of hysteria provides a sobering look at how cultural biases can infiltrate scientific understanding, leading to the misdiagnosis and mistreatment of individuals based on their gender. It serves as a cautionary tale, urging us to continuously scrutinize the intersections between medicine, gender, and social attitudes to avoid perpetuating harmful stereotypes and practices.